Hey everybody! Today I wanted to start a series for people who are looking to get into firearms for the first time. Maybe they don't know too much about it. Specifically, we'll be dealing with handguns, at least for the first start of the series. And the purpose will be mostly for like self-defense type stuff. I'm not going to get too much into hunting and all that. So if you're new to firearms, you don't know anything about handguns, this series should help you out. And what we're going to start with is talking about trigger actions. So inevitably, when you're talking to friends of yours that are into guns, or if you go to a gun store and you're looking at guns, you're going to start to hear about things like a single action, a double single action, double action only, single action only, striker fire, all this kind of stuff. So what does that mean? Well, what they're talking about is how many things can the trigger do when you pull it? And if you just said, fire the gun, stop being a smartass, okay? That's why nobody likes you. What we're talking about is, can the trigger only release the hammer, like in a single action, or can it cock and release the hammer by pulling the trigger? A single action only, as the name might imply, it can only do one thing, which is release the hammer. So if the hammer is in the down position all the way forward, the trigger isn't going to do anything. However, if it's in the back or cocked position, now the trigger can release it and the gun can fire. If it has a double action functionality in it, the trigger can do both functions. So even with the hammer in the up position, as you pull the trigger, it can do both. It can cock, so I'm going to do it slow where you can see it, and release the hammer. So, what is that going to mean for you? Well, it can get a little bit complicated, and especially when you're talking about different types of guns with different types of trigger actions and things. But for the most part, what you need to think about is how hard is it going to be to pull the trigger? And is it going to be the same trigger pull over and over, or is it going to be different? So, with a single action only gun, it's going to be the same trigger pull every time, and it's typically going to be a little bit lighter, meaning it's going to take less poundage to break the shot. So it's this pull, if it's say 4 pounds, it's going to be 4 pounds every time, because when you pull the trigger, the gun's going to go off, it's going to cycle, it's going to cock the hammer back, and you're going to have the exact same consistent pull every time. Now, if you have a double single action and a revolver at least, then you can either have the long, heavy double action pull, or you can manually cock it and have a much lighter single action pull. So with this, you can kind of choose what it's going to be like. Now, if it's a semi-automatic, your first pull is going to be the long, heavy pull. But then after that, the slide's going to reciprocate and cock the hammer just like on this, and then you're going to go to a much lighter trigger pull, about roughly half the poundage. So if that first pull is, say, 10 pounds long and heavy, because it's got to cock the hammer and release it, every other round after that, or every other trigger pull, is going to be roughly about half, maybe 4 or 5 pounds. So you basically have to learn 2 different trigger pulls with that. Not the end of the world. It's very easily done, but maybe something to consider. Now, with a striker fire gun, like this Glock, this is a completely different system. This doesn't have a hammer at all. This simply has a firing pin that's under tension, and it always stays in roughly like a half-cocked position. And then when you pull the trigger, it finishes pulling the firing pin to the rear and then releases it almost kind of like a slingshot. then the gun has to cycle to reset that firing pin back into position, and that resets the trigger like that, and then you can fire again. But it's the same pull every time. So even though it is technically cocking the gun the rest of the way on the trigger pull, it feels more like a single action only because it's very consistent. You can't, maybe you could call it a double action only, but it really doesn't fall into any of those categories because it's not cocking a hammer. It's just pulling the firing pin back and releasing it, basically. So it's a very different system, and you can get different trigger weights in these, and you can even change them out to, pretty much whatever you want. So when you're looking at buying a handgun for the first time and you hear the term single action only, double action only, hopefully you'll know what that means a little more. Because if it's a double action only, imagine if you had this revolver but no hammer, or the hammer was maybe cut off or bobbed, and you couldn't cock it back manually. Well, it would be the same pull every time. It would just be a little bit longer and heavier. So there's pros and cons that come with that. A lot of people like it for self-defense, myself included. I think it's a good idea. But for now, just knowing what the terms mean is what we're trying to accomplish, so that you don't look like a moron when you go in there looking at guns and it comes up and you don't know what's going on. So just know that if somebody says this gun's a single action only, then you know, okay, I need to make sure that if I go to shoot this, the hammer is cocked back before I go pulling the trigger and then looking like a moron. If they say it's a double single action or a double action only, probably don't have to worry about it, because you know, oh, I can just pull the trigger and the trigger is going to cock the hammer for me. So you're good. If it's a striker fire gun, you just got to make sure that you put the mag in, rack around, the trigger's good, and it's going to be the same every single time. Nothing to worry about. Somebody hands you a single action only revolver. Well, they said single action only, right? So I got to cock the hammer every time. Don't cock the hammer the first time, pull the trigger, and then be like, hey, gun's broken. Got to keep cocking the hammer every time on a revolver. Now, don't think that if somebody hands you a single action only semi-automatic, that when you fire it, oh, I got to keep cocking the hammer. I've actually seen people think that. Don't do that. When it's just the first time, and really you don't have to think about it too much at all. Just know that when you load the magazine, and see the hammer's up right there. So if I load a magazine and I put a round in the chamber, look, the hammer's back. So now I can shoot the gun because the hammer's back. And if you're going to carry a gun like this, you actually carry it with the hammer back and the thumb safety up, so that it's now safe-ish, as long as you're not doing something bad wrong or you're a moron. So hopefully that helps. And if I need to go in more depth later on, I can. The next video, we will talk about grips and what to look for in a gun when you're checking the grip and looking at a gun, maybe at like a gun store, or you're checking out your buddy's gun, and you're like, yeah, this gun feels great. And you just look like an idiot. Let's fix that on the next video. See you guys.